Hi, everyone, and welcome to AI Interconnect, the podcast where we talk to the builders, the bold thinkers, and the quiet disruptors shaping how business get down. I'm your host, Lauren, and today's guests bring a rare mix of tech fluency, storytelling precision, and forward looking insights. I'm joined by Eric Holder, founder of Holder Communication, a strategy consulting consultancy trusted by global brand like IBM, Intel, Dell, and HP. And Eric's work span um, apply AI, governance, product positioning, and go-to-market execution with a contribution from uh, Davos to OpenAI to the New York Times, and we and so on and so on. We are very lucky to have him here with us. And Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lauren. Super happy to be talking to you, and I appreciate that introduction. You're too kind.
That's there were so many things to say, but we only have an hour,
Oh,
and but but it's so cool. Then let's start from the beginning, Eric. You've built a career where strategy meets communication, and now AI. What first got you into the world of strategic communication and product storytelling?
well, in the realm of property tech, in our prop tech conversation, uh, did you want to kind of lean it towards that sector?
No, no, anything of about you. It's not about prop tech anymore.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, in that case, let me let me pull a document up here. Give me just 1 second. Uh, I wanted to. I initially wanted to talk about AI and prop tech because I'd been getting
Yeah,
so,
it is
so many
about.
questions about it, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about a presentation I did to a CEO network about AI Martech stacks, platforms that folks are using for everything from prospecting to analytics and decision making. But I got my start, oddly enough. I thought when I got out of school as a communications major, I thought real estate was the way to go. So I, as a very young man, got an agent's designation in real estate here in the state of Georgia, and I got on with a big national name called Remax. It didn't take me long to find out I was an abysmal uh, sales agent. But what was really intriguing to me, now we're going back to 2000, early 2000s. What was really intriguing to me were how crummy the websites were back then and how limited they were in search marketing, usability. Usability and human computer interaction were some focal points of mine back then. And I just took a complete pivot and I spun up an SEO boutique agency just for real estate folks in the beginning. And I'm still doing it. I'm still providing those services over 20 years later. The difference is, as SEO and real estate sort of fluctuates with the market, we found ourselves looking to diversify. And for me, I ran into cloud computing. So I worked with a couple of Fortune 100 companies. You mentioned some of them as a content marketing strategist, and so we were looking at everything about explainer videos, product marketing, uh, customer case studies. That lasted probably until about 2020. And I happened to be working with a research firm called Forrester. A lot of folks know Forrester Research. They're right up there with IDC and Gartner. And we were doing Cloud Trends 2021, looking ahead to the future. I'd earlier I'd done Cloud Trends 2018. And the difference between 2018 and 2021 was profound, because we were talking about machine learning and deep learning, which, as you know, are subsets of the larger AI category. But we weren't calling it AI. We didn't think that that was very sexy back then. We were calling it machine learning and deep learning. And then all of a sudden, ChatGPT is launched, and AI becomes accessible. Keeping in mind it was generative AI, but the applications for marketing, particularly, in addition to research and corporate decision making, were immense. So I immediately took a position with an AI startup company in Chicago, and we were working on a new platform. And so I was thinking, software as a service. Why not AI as a service? So I worked on thought leadership primarily, like how can this AI product in human resources be disruptive? And as cliche as that sound, the automations were really amazing. And consequently, I got us listed as the number 8 AI HR platform by Inc. 5000 back in 21. That gave me an opportunity to go to work with another AI company. These guys were located on the West Coast. They're right there in Silicon Valley, and they were working with probably the world's foremost scientist on active inference, and his name is Professor Carl Friston. And Wired magazine just did a follow-up to their article on him last month. Amazing guy, but active inference was really a way to was really a means towards explainable AI. And when we get to talking about AI governance, and we're looking at compliance, risk, ethics, explainability is really the name of the game. So I was sort of his thought leader partner. I would try to take very complicated ideas. Half our staff had PhDs, but let's face it, most of the enterprise CEOs, they're not looking for a longhand explanation. They're looking for that hypodermic needle. How is this going to help me today? So I helped him with some conversations at Davos with Jan LeCun and Sir Tim Berners-Lee, the founder of the World Wide Web. And I really gained a good appreciation of the theoretical side of AI, but really applied AI using generative technology is really the name of the game in terms of entrepreneurial work. So our enterprise clients, small to medium-sized businesses, and even startups and early growth companies, they want to know, how can I use AI right now to affect my bottom line? And that's really the wrong question to ask. So I, as a consultant who comes from cloud computing, I use a lot of these analogies, and you're asking the wrong question. It's let's identify the problem. What would you like to be more efficient? And perhaps that's onboarding a human resource. Perhaps that's analyzing data for investments. Perhaps that's being a better communicator to your clients. And particularly, when we look at real estate, relationships are really the name of the game. And when we can put natural language processing into real estate, and we're no longer trying to go into drop down menus and filter a home, you can just say, hey, I'm looking for a 4-bedroom house with a view of the sun and the Rocky Mountains under $750,000. So real estate's getting very interesting in the way that it's going to be able to communicate with investors, property managers, brokers, realtors, buyers, sellers. People like you and I are all going to find AI as making real estate much more approachable. But this is the same across organizations, and this is when we look at startup companies in marketing. They're really looking into automations, like what can we automate, and how can we enhance these large language models that might have been trained on a data set 6 months ago. And in our world, 6 months is forever. So it's kind of like that expiration date we have on milk. Is it past the expiration date? Well, if it is, you better give it the smell test. And in my sense, if we're asking questions about our internal knowledge, perhaps it could be better done using a technique like RAG or cache augmented generation. But even RAG with retrieval augmented generation, that's very similar to just creating an internal knowledge base. So some of the companies that I've been spinning up lately, the knowledgebase.ai, the knowledgebot.ai, these are tools that companies, particularly small to medium sized businesses and local, what we call mom and pop startups, but we know that sometimes they're grossing millions of dollars. They need an AI agent that isn't the conversational bot that a lot of people get annoyed with. And for our older viewers out there, we can think of Clippy at Microsoft when that came out in Windows version 3.0. It was super annoying. And then a company named Drift, who I loved, they do conversational marketing with bots, but it's still rules based. If then scenarios. They felt like templates, and typically after 2 or 3 questions, they fail. And so AI agents now that are acting as your assistant, it just opens up a completely new game for not only customer support and prospecting, because we can integrate these with CRMs like HubSpot, Salesforce. We can integrate them with calendar schedule makers. So really right there in your window, using a knowledge base that complements a large language model. So we're still using an API to access the LLMs, but we're going through a knowledge base that's specific to that company. So I tell people, I said, LLMs have a knowledge problem. Their knowledge is based off of an older data set that may not be relevant to your area of specialization. So we'll create a knowledge base, and we kind of approach it using RAG techniques and models. Now that's very helpful for a lot of folks, and I think that it's going to be that one thing that a lot of folks need. They need to start somewhere. We can't boil the ocean. There's no silver bullet. Rather, think of it like 100 little golden BBs. And when you put those together, you've got that momentum, right? It's about leadership. It's about thought leadership within your company. If your company, I'll give you a quick example. I was talking to a really good platform. It's called Instantly.ai. And folks just love how easy it is to use for email marketing. Well, because one thing, they do such a great job of verification, validation, and you know how hard the European Union market is with cold marketing. But I was talking to one of their account directors, and he said, "You know what? I didn't even get trained by a person. I got trained by a bot," and I found that astounding. And then the more I thought about it, I thought that is really a good signal for a company, that wants to send out a signal like we're using AI from your onboarding to closing sales. And the main things for me is making that relationship easier, is making the user experience more fluid. And I keep harking on about natural language processing to a lot of clients, but that's so critical. And as a community, as a culture, we're already trained on that. We're talking to our phone. You may be talking to Alexa or Siri, but the building blocks for that sort of interaction have been laid quite well. So integrating it into a personal agent that knows your preferences, your likes, your responses, it's going to be amazing. And I think that's important for companies to not try to just put AI in to satisfy their investors or their advisory board or even some of their clients. Use AI and in a small baby step, get that one win, get a good case use study, and then start building on that. And that's been my advice to CEOs, is to just kind of approach it incrementally.
Okay, I love it. Okay, then that's a good lesson on AI tutorials. But let's dig into all the or all the communication. When you launch it, what gap were you trying to fill into the market?
Thank you for asking that question. I hardly ever get asked that, but as I mentioned earlier, I spun up my first agency called Internet Site Promotions. And this was so long ago that, we didn't know if it was going to be called internet sites or websites. But for me, this was before the 2014 infamous Hummingbird update that Google put out that killed exact match domains. So I needed to kind of pivot my model because, again, these volatile markets like real estate, they're not good for substantial growth, right? And I spun up HolderCom in 2008 because I was doing so much consultation with cloud companies, particularly channel partnerships. And we were talking about encryption. And it just occurred to me that there's a huge gap in the industry, particularly technology marketing, that later became known as content marketing. So before we were calling it content strategy and content marketing, HolderCom was spun up to sort of meet that need because we felt like so many product engineers and leaders, and I mean no offense at all, but so many of these product marketing companies weren't really taking into consideration the conveyability of these ideas. So I was trying to do explainer videos and just break complex ideas into their simplest elements, and that ended up being about a 6-year relationship with a huge silicon semiconductor company called LSI. And I was their vendor, and they put me in touch with Dell, Intel, IBM, flew me out to Germany to work with HP. So it was just a super fit. And when that company was acquired by Avago, HolderCom kept growing because those leaders and their senior vice presidents of product, their chief marketing officers, they went to different companies and they called me. And one of them went to VirtuStream, which was another cloud company. And they asked me to help them do some work with an SAP presentation, which I did. Next thing we know, they got acquired by Dell, and that really gave HolderCom a lot of opportunities. They got acquired by EMC, and at that point, HolderCom was sort of it was stagnant because when all of your clients get acquired by huge companies with rich resources, we have to pivot, and so I was able to kind of pivot into AI and get into some opportunities to grow right as the evolution was happening right before our very eyes. And we really have to go back to an 18th century thinking of like from Industrial Revolution when light bulbs were still like a magical thing. And we're still there. The internet hasn't been around but about 30 years, but this new capability with chips like NVIDIA's chips that enable all the theoretical applications that have honestly been around since the 60s and 70s, but now there's just the juice, the processing power to bring that to life and to make it accessible through a SaaS model. Everybody can afford to get in the game. It now becomes a question of evaluating your marketing technology, and it becomes a question of identifying who the leaders are in your company and how to create agile teams to get these projects going in the right direction. So HolderCom has evolved with the industry, and as I said, we keep spinning up companies to try to meet demand for products that we think are going to be popular for another 20 years, just like SEO was.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I saw that HolderCom became the umbrella for 5 different niches or niche services company. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's ambitious. And what was the thinking behind creating those verticals, and how did you keep it all cohesive?
Thank you. That's another great question, Laura. So it didn't happen. There wasn't a master plan. Now my background is in journalism, and in journalism, something quite interesting has happened. We've gone from being investigative reporters to technologists. In any good journalism school, there's a research facet, and then there's the on-air personalities. Well, I always had a face for radio, so I had to kind of go into emerging technology, and this is kind of been a good transition. And so when HolderCom came out, I started writing a lot. what can I do well? I know I can write well. I know I can dissect information and just sort of dilute messages into something that's more comprehensible to a broader audience. And I started getting calls from restaurants, and I started getting calls from production companies in LA and New York, and I started getting calls from tour and travel destinations, and of course we're not going to we're not going to turn down any business. And so what we did is just hired a couple more people. For about 10 years I had a terrestrial office, and we had folks in house. This was pre-pandemic, and so we were able to sit around every Monday morning and we just ideate. And once we'd get 5 or 6 restaurant campaigns, because restaurants need search marketing, restaurants need online technology to compete, and so do destinations, tourist destinations, and so do pretty much any company. So once we'd have 4 or 5 case studies, then we'd say, okay, let's spin it out into a business. And this was pre 2014, so we were using exact match domains to get at the very top of search quick. So I could literally create a website, have it on page 1 for 5 or 6 keyword phrases within 2 weeks. And so we were able to get market penetration into these niche verticals very quickly. And so I thrive on the positive reinforcement. So as soon as we spun one up for real estate, we spun another up for video production. And before I knew it, my office expanded into a studio production facility. And then all of a sudden, our technology clients were coming to our studio, and we were putting a green screen up and doing a lot of this in-house. So we got a lot of efficiencies created through spinning up these verticals, and it worked really great for a while. And by the end of the 2018 or so, there's a lot of tough competition because online marketing had grown to very niche verticals. So every vertical that I went after, whether it's the service industry or the prop tech industry, there was a huge $1 million or $1 billion company that was spinning up their own version with lots more resources. And one example that I thought was going to kill me at first, and it was Zillow. Zillow was just so obnoxious. There they were all of a sudden on page 1, and we couldn't get ahead of them. And the reason is because they had millions of dollars of infrastructure. But today I'm one of their proponents. I think that they're a part of the puzzle. And anytime we're looking at problem solving, again, it's never a silver bullet. I always want to pitch lots of things that can help support, that 100 golden BBs. So Zillow is now using machine learning to estimate prices. Of course, they're using personalization because they're tracking your behavior. They're giving us interactive floor plans that are so cool. A lot of the virtual environments that we had even 5-10 years ago were pretty cheesy, and now they're very slick. They look like they were done by an interior design firm, and you're just dropping and dragging in a no-code environment. And also they're having tools to help the agent, because again, in real estate, like all markets, are based off relationships. So if I give my clients AI technology where they can find what's being listed sooner, faster than the competition, then that's a competitive advantage. And even AI has biases. We know about hallucinations, and this goes back into AI governance. So we also have to kind of name check Zillow for doing good at fair housing checks, because if they're integrating and partnering with a mortgage company, and someone uses AI to fill out an application, but they're denied, well, here we go back to AI explainability. We have to know why they're denied for explainability, because that's a compliance concern. I hope I didn't go too far of a tangent there.
No. That's
those
great.
are a lot of examples of how Holder Comp was able to build a portfolio of companies, because I'm just reacting to what I'm seeing out there in the field. And I'm the type of entrepreneur, if you will, that really I have my feet on the street every day, and I visit clients, I listen to their pain points, and I don't do anything virtually. I like to talk to my clients face to face, meet with them face to face, if you can believe it or not, if possible, and really get a sense of where that pain point is. Because sometimes all this technical jargon, it makes it hard to express your feelings.
Of course, of course. No, very very interesting. Let's zoom out a little bit. And you have work across enterprise tech, AI, HR platforms, and more. What are 2 or 3 major shifts you're seeing right now that companies should be paying closer attention to?
I think the shift is a panic, and I often find myself trying to quell some of these anxieties. I talked to 2 CEOs earlier this week. One was in fintech, the other one was in supply chain, fulfillment, logistics. But these are both 30 million plus companies, and the CEO has given mandates. And so I'm talking to the CMOs and some of the product leaders of these teams, and they don't really know what they don't know. That I don't mean that as a pejorative. I just mean to say they just don't know the right questions. And again, putting AI into place for the sake of having an AI tool that we can tell our investors and our employees and our clients about is not the right approach. But it's a trend that I'm seeing. And so yesterday, for example, a lot of the CEOs in the presentation I gave to this rather large CEO network was that they found that they've gotten 5 or 6 subscriptions to AI platforms, and the analogy is really easy. Think about your your entertainment viewing habits. First of all, there was Netflix, then maybe Hulu, then maybe Prime, Amazon. And the great thing about those companies is that they typically don't have the same kind of content. But so oftentimes we look at our bank statement, we realize we're aggregating $100 every month in subscriptions, and so it's kind of addictive in that sense. And I think enterprise corporations and SMBs alike tend to err on the side of, well, let's just get 2 or 3 different platforms where we can make sure we're using AI for something. And the thing is there's so much redundancies because we're all just dealing with generative AI. So we're all kind of dealing with the same 52 card deck. So how do we make generative AI work for us? And do we need a custom solution, which is much more expensive and it takes much longer? So we think about enterprise accounts, or do we need that hypodermic needle that we can come in and immediately automate some processes? So the trend is people jumping, and I tell them, take baby steps. Let's evaluate your marketing technology stack. Let's evaluate what problem you're trying to solve, and let's slow down because there's plenty of time to get there once you get started and get some momentum going. I think that's the main trend. Another trend, unfortunately, I hate to report, is disinformation. So as someone who is constantly, every day I spend a couple of hours listening to other people. I'll sign up for demos. I'll sign up for webinars. I'll listen to YouTube pitches from very appealing and savvy young entrepreneurs. And unfortunately, there's a lot of disinformation. There's a lot of there's a lot of style over function. People are just trying to package the same thing and not really offering any service. For us entrepreneurs out there, for small to medium-sized businesses, for startups trying to ramp up to early growth and scalability, there's a real temptation to buy into something that you don't need and get into something that you don't really understand. And so many people are selling products and they're acting, they're evangelizing AI technology, and it just feels scammy. And so those are the 2 trends. I see CEOs sort of bewildered about what step to take next, and then I see a lot of technology offerings, if you will, that are plagued with disinformation, and I think a lot of it is inherent. So podcasts like yours hopefully help people sort of destruct that and understand what's
Yeah,
substance.
yeah. I mean, yeah. It's so difficult for everyone to select the right network, the right platform, or the right host podcast. Um, need
I made the
to
right.
listen. We need to listen and be fast at selecting, be fast at analyzing the quality of such or such. But let's talk about challenges. With such a wide view from deep tech to startups, are there consistent messaging challenges you keep seeing, or is everything vertical? Every vertical is on beast.
Increasingly, it's the latter. The messaging is built around specific problems. So, and it's kind of a two-headed monster in that respect, because the company I talked to, the fintech company I mentioned earlier, they're looking at fintech solutions specifically, right? And so these are platforms that are made specifically for that industry. And that's great, but if they're already using a platform that does the same thing, they just don't shout about it as loudly, and they're not a peacock about it, if you will. Then we sometimes gravitate towards the shiny objects, right? And so the messaging gets really it's really a challenge, because we want to talk to specific audiences about specific problems, and you can't be everything to everybody. Now, on the same token, these end-to-end solutions, these platforms that offer pretty much everything, from generative content, ideation, to analysis of analytics, they really offer everything. They're just not shouting about it. So sometimes we want to look at what they're currently using and see if that's already something that fits with their problem that they've identified. On the other hand, if it's a very specific problem, which this fintech company, they have a very specific SaaS product that the messaging is going to be easy, because it only relates to about 30,000 people in terms of their target market audience in America. And when we were pulling, comps, we got maybe 15,000 in the European Union. So that's a very specific message, which for me is a little bit easier than trying to be all things to everybody. We see a lot of this in social media. We have platforms that, they have predictive analytics, they have social listening, they have content generation. And that's great. That may be the only platform a lot of PR agencies and social media agencies need. On the other hand, if you're a mom and pop shop and you've got 2 or 3 franchises and maybe overhead of a couple $1 million, well, you may need something that fits your use case specifically, and then the usability becomes the messaging. How easy is this to use? How easy is this to onboard? And how easy is this to implement? And that's why knowledge bases are so critical as your first step, in my opinion, because we can load up. You're basically just loading up all of your knowledge into a database, right? And it's a relational database. I mean, vector databases are later, and RAG models will use a vector database sort of as a intermediary between the knowledge base and the LLM. But for 90% of the businesses, just augmenting that LLM with a knowledge base is enough. And all of a sudden, I can embed that on their website, and in a matter of days, we can have the complete process, and then it's completely maintenance free. The only thing that they would need to do is, if they had a new product, hey, we've got a new product and it's an orange stick. Okay, give me the product sheet, give me the definitions, give me the case studies, give me everything you've got. I'll add it to the database, or the knowledge base rather, as we call it, and then it'll automatically be a part of that AI agent. So those are the things that I think are going to stick and help people take baby steps.
Makes sense. Let's talk about pain points about your clients, and what are the top challenges your clients face when it comes to messaging, positioning, or adapting to changes in this fast-moving AI landscape?
So this is where an AI agent is really your personal assistant. Everybody should have, at least folks like us, everybody should have not one, 5 or 6 AI agents. I've got 10 AI agents that have been trained specifically on fintech, prop tech, HR tech. I've got them trained, and the way I've trained them is through giving them additional information in the knowledge base, but also through prompt. So as we have CMOs relying more and more on their managers and their directors to create content, because content is still king. In particular, I want to talk a little bit about generative engine optimization and ask anything optimization. But CMOs, particularly on the enterprise level, they're just blindly asking for content, and lots of times I'm reading content that a professional writer wrote, and it just reeks of AI. And once you read enough of it, there's a lot of tails, and you probably know them yourself. But if we put something into Grammarly, okay, it's only as good as Grammarly. If you put something in ChatGPT, it's only as good as ChatGPT. And then there's these third-party generators that will take an AI-generated blog, and then they'll make it more friendly or funny or wittier. And so these are just playing around with the tone. But that's a real challenge of relying on AI tools to do the messaging for you. Now, certainly, if we're launching a product, let's use an example of the fintech company again. They're on my mind. If we're launching a product, I want to use my specific fintech agent to talk about messaging that's already out there. Now, I don't really care if that's 6 months old or 3 months old, because I'm just trying to get a general sense of what's being pitched. And then I'll go in and I'll do a lot of searches, and I'll sort of not use Google in the traditional search sense. We're using Google's Ask Anything engine. So we're getting a little bit deeper dives, and that really helps with messaging. It really helps to form the framework of the messaging. But again, it can reek of AI, particularly as we have our managers and content strategists and content developers. They're relying on it too much, so that inner creativity is getting lost, and it's a real big problem, because what we're seeing is there's just a bunch of homogenous content. Like, I'm seeing trends in content, and I can name it. I look at my LinkedIn feed sometimes, and it's just I can't believe what some people are posting, because it just reeks of generative AI. So that's a real challenge in messaging.
Exactly. You're deep into agentic AI and building knowledge system, like you said, and custom agent for SMBs. For people not familiar with these concepts, how would you explain it simply, and where do you see real traction happening in the next 12 months?
Well, if we look at Gartner's hype cycle, which is always a fun read, we look at the 2022 hype cycle, where they're basically creating a curve, and along that curve, we have the law of diminishing returns at the top of the curve, and they're plotting out what they think is going to happen. And so I was just reviewing their 2025 and sort of comparing it to 2024, and agentic AI is critical. We see that happening in the next 2 years. And so when we look at AI agents as being an agentic tool, we're not quite there yet. So last December, I was listening to a Salesforce keynote speech by their CEO at the year-end sort of rally, and they were talking about agentic AI, and even those guys are misusing it. And I think it comes honestly, because we're reacting to what we're hearing. and we're thinking that AI is capable of more than it is, and we need to take a step back and remember that these AI tools that are available to us now are generative AI. So they can do code, they can analyze problems, they can give you suggestions. But in terms of being proactive, in terms of acting autonomously, okay, now we're starting to talk about characteristics that are emblematic of an autonomous system. So when we look at autonomous, cars, for example, we talked about a lot of this in this AI governance paper that I was a part of a couple of years ago. And it's, if you're a car and you're an autonomous and agentic, and you see a red sign in the back of a pickup truck, you might slam on your brakes because you were trained on a set of data that says, hey, red octagon, stop, right? So they're still not thinking autonomously, and they're still not connecting all the dots. But as technology progresses, and I think explainability is the key to this, explainable AI, active inference, whichever route we go with, and by we, I mean, the masses, like whatever the next big breakthrough is, it's going to be explainability. And that's going to open the door to real agentic AIs that are accessible to you and I for fractions of what it would cost an enterprise to develop it, on using the same knowledge, except we're not using the same knowledge. We're going to use our own knowledge, and therefore we don't use as many tokens, and the scalability is just limited to our imagination. So explaining this to someone who may not be as deep in the weeds as we are, I would say, think of an AI agent as your personal assistant. And the more you train it using prompt engineering, the better it is. Now, you can train it to ask you follow-up questions. So we've got to kind of understand that when we go to ChatGPT and we just open the box, they're already putting a number of prompts into it to make the average user have a good experience. I suggest anybody that's on the development side, same price, get into a sandbox where it's a completely blank canvas. But for folks that are just getting into ChatGPT or any large language model, they need to understand that it has limitations. It's not a silver bullet, and I would say do a little bit. Go to YouTube and watch some videos on prompt engineering, and it's going to make your experience so much better. And it's really like SEO was, search marketing back in the day. We used to just say, hey, I need a lawyer. And then the nuances became longer and longer. Hey, I need a lawyer in Atlanta that is the best. And so we're giving the search engine criteria that's not only the thing, but it's a modifier, the best. And then we have a locator in Atlanta. Well, generative AI works the same way through prompt engineering. And so we don't think of it that way when we're just opening up ChatGPT and we're asking it questions. But I want everyone to kind of align themselves and start thinking about the tone, the task, exemplars, and in that order. So you tell your agent, I'm working on a real estate website, or I'm working on a social media campaign for my car dealership. Whatever it is, just tell it what you're doing. And I know that sounds super simple, but we're breaking it down to the fundamentals of getting what you want as accurately as possible, because unfortunately the ability to hallucinate is inherent in these LLMs. So you've got to be very specific, but you can't be too long-winded because the prompt loses a little bit of its efficiency, in my opinion, with so many different criteria. So give it to it in chunks. Hey, I'm working on a real estate website, and I need you to be a real estate website assistant, and you're an expert, and I need help with my headlines, and I need help with my layout, and I need help with my SEO. But I want it written in a witty style, and I want it to have a friendly tone. And here are some examples of websites I like. Now we're on the road to getting a very good answer. And so as people just start to tread these waters, just realize that when you open these assistants, that out of the box, they're made for everybody, but we have to kind of slowly customize them for what we're trying to get. And just talking to it naturally isn't quite enough. We need to give it explicit instructions, starting with the task and following a sort of a logical step of tone, examples, and outcomes.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Makes a lot of sense. Moving on, you co-authored Applied AI, a guide now used by OpenAI, AWS, and Google training clients. And what stood out most during that process, either from the business side or the technical complexity?
Right. So I was contacted by one of the biggest AI trainers in the world, and their clients are OpenAI, Google, and AWS. And so they were hiring me for thought leadership, market positioning, and really to try to understand how to better sort of contextualize what they're doing in terms of business applications. Because just AI training, okay, that's great for them as sort of their cash cow. And so I went through AWS prompt engineering classes. I went to OpenAI, so I got a firsthand look at what AWS was training thousands of people around the world working remotely that are helping to tune these models up, right, through training. And so I got to see how AWS does it, Google, and OpenAI. And what I found was a lot of similarities. And you and I talked about prompt engineering, and I just spoke about it here. But it is the thing that we were trying to sort of communicate to CEOs. Because here's a company that is known for its AI training, but we're trying to present to 100 CEOs like, well, here's how applied AI can work for your situation. So as we were looking at that presentation, and when I wrote the blog to sort of back it up and sort of, look at it in terms of a framework or an outline, we just kept going back to identify a problem that is solvable and just start somewhere, because we all know we have to implement AI. All right, we all know that's mission critical. It's just like telling a company, a restaurant, a real estate firm that you don't need websites. Don't worry about it. Word of mouth. No one's going to believe that. And it's the same thing as we're vetting out companies to invest in. We're vetting out companies that we may want to work for or have them work for us as a partner. We're going to look at how they're using AI. And so that's the big scare out there, is that companies aren't using it and they can't wave their flag that say, hey, look at us, we're using AI. Well, you can't just use it for the sake of using it. So applied AI is something that we were just sort of evangelizing, that this has to have a practical application. It may not be, it may not be a Lamborghini. It may not be very shiny, but what we're trying to get right now is that 4-cylinder Honda Accord that gets incredible gas mileage. And then once we drive that for a few years, maybe you can save up your money and get a Corvette. But it's incrementally, and it's having a very practical applied approach and keeping things kind of reeled in. This is just generative AI. And so once we just sort of resign ourselves that this is just generative AI, it's not magic, and then it's not as hocus pocus as a lot of people would have you believe. It's just generative AI. So let's look at some practical solutions of how we can automate, integrate, and increase efficiencies. And so that was the aim of that paper and presentation.
I love it. I'm very curious. I would love to take a look on it.
I'll share it with you. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
It's let's take a step back for a second. You have worked with Fortune 500, global nonprofit and startups. Is there one project or client that feels like it captures everything you're about, where stories, strategy, and tech all clicked together?
You know what? It's very difficult to pitch that on an enterprise level. We are we're seeing a shift, I think, in the way people view marketing employees, for example. So, this goes from product marketing to marketing services or offerings. They're looking for people with very explicit specializations. Like, I want my software engineer to be able to write in React and script Java, top of his head. And of course, we know everyone uses Anthropic or Claude. We're not going to do that anymore. I could never do it. I've always just been sort of a hack at code, but I know enough to understand and have a good constructive conversation with a software developer who really is entrenched in code and lives in that world. What we're trying to do is to convey that Holder Communications, as a marketing and strategy firm, we cover all the bases. And when we run into something that requires very specific knowledge, it's much more cost effective to contract that out. But I'm not talking going to some of these online job boards. We need to be very strategic about how we choose our employees, because we're relying on AI too much to do screening. We're relying on AI too much to give us those 4 or 5, top candidates to interview, because what they're doing is they're taking the job description, they're putting it in, if they're smart, they're putting it into a very specific AI agent that's been prompted to heck. Like, you're an HR director, you're an HR recruiter, you're a people teams director. And those top applicants may not be the top applicants. They just may be the cleverest at getting through those ATS barriers. And so it's getting more difficult to find people that are doing things very specifically very well. But in terms of having a generalist, like myself, I'm a technologist in terms of I'm really passionate about using AI responsibly, and so governance plays into my pitch, and I'm very pragmatic. So as someone may be interviewing me, they may like those traits, which tend to err on being conservative. And there's a guy right behind me who's going to be completely, a yes man or woman, and they're going to paint a picture of optimism with rainbows, and those sometimes lead you down the wrong path. And finding the right employees and sifting through thousands of resumes that are all they're all augmented in some way or the other from ChatGPT. That's the real problem. And as I talk to people, I rely on my experience. And lots of times I find myself saying, the cloud, the digital transformation that cloud made possible when we were taking our databases from on-prem to off-prem, that was a big, big leap. And it's a similar leap in messaging for AI tools, because, just as a lot of IT directors were in the basement with hundreds of servers and, you had $1 million to keep all that functioning correctly. Now enterprises can go into the cloud. They're scaling, but they're scaling more on a utility pricing scheme where you only pay for what you use. Well, that's amazing. Where do I sign? And so cloud technology was amazing for 10 years. And then AI is going through the same growing pains. We're trying to present that value proposition without overselling it. And it's really difficult because there's so many folks out there that are selling promises they can't really back up, and they're probably hoping you don't know the difference. So, we have a challenge communicating our integrity, and we have a challenge communicating what differentiates us from other consultants and developers, because we're not only consulting, we're also developing projects and products. And it's just a real challenge to get through all the disinformation. And I've kind of just given up on my website, to be honest with you. I'm for the last 15 years, I've just been word of mouth. and that's something that we can do with age. But as younger entrepreneurs, they don't have that network, they don't have that body of work and portfolio case studies. Desperate times sometimes call for desperate measures, and we see folks kind of stretching the truth of what these AI products can really provide. So that's a challenge. And so applied AI is sort of my pitch, if you will, towards anyone thinking about adapting it, and they should. But this AI transformation, as think of it as a subset of a larger goal, which is digital transformation, and this is really about leadership within the company. It's not about getting a SaaS product that does some AI function really well. That doesn't make you an AI company.
I like it. I like this. When you think about legacy beyond clients and campaign, what do you want people to say about the way you show up in a room?
Well, I hope I've still got some products that are still viable. We're constantly working on products that have a long shelf life and that can automate passive income. So I hope those things are still working, and I can kind of talk about those, and I'm not just stuck talking about the good old days, because that's so tempting. I just hope they see me as someone who's honest, pragmatic, and I'm not just trying to sell them the latest and greatest shiny thing. I'm trying to listen and be a consultant and advisor, and then if they need that other arm to put together a development team, well, that's even better. But really, we're just looking for that relationship. C-level folks need to be talked to in plain English, and talked with, not talked to, but they need plain English conversations that aren't riddled with a bunch of nomenclature that just it just muddles the picture. So we just try to make it simple, but we don't try to dumb it down to the point to where we're not proud of the technology, or we're not proud of the efficiencies it's going to create. So just kind of balancing passion and enthusiasm with being pragmatic and conservative, and trying to, I know this sounds cliche, but we always try to under promise and over deliver. And gosh, I wish everybody did that.
That's great. That's cool. And finally, what keeps you grounded when things get hard? What's your anchor?
Family. It's the relationships that are off the platform. I've got a very regimented use for myself. I regiment how much I'm in front of the computer. So when I'm in front of the computer, say from 5 a.m. to 5:30 in the morning, up until about 3 p.m., I feel like I'm at my sharpest. But when I turn that off and it's time to meet people, shake hands, visit facilities, and or just spend time on a walk with your wife and your dog, or your partner, or whomever, you've got to get away from the computer screen. We don't need to look at it every night compulsively. I don't care if you're following the crypto market, or if you're following how many hits I got on my last campaign. Gosh, I've wasted a lot of hours just looking at my smartphone constantly. And I finally, it was right around the pandemic, I finally just said, you know what, I'm changing this, and I'm completely changing my schedule, and that's really helped me feel grounded. And believe it or not, it's increased my creativity. Having some downtime that has nothing to do with technology, and it could just be as simple as riding a bike or taking a walk, focusing on nature. These are things that fire off those synapses and keep us creative, often more times than watching YouTube videos on and on and on, and trying to get inspired by that. Sometimes we can find inspiration in the places we're not looking. So go out there and look at different places and be inspired.
That's great. Great words. And that's amazing, Eric. This has been packed with insights, and from agentic AI to ethical storytelling. You've given us a lot of a lot of things to think about. And thank you for being so generous with your idea and time. I love it. We had a great time.
It was great, Laurent. I really appreciate having the opportunity to chat with you and go back and forth. I know it's been a while that we've been talking, but I feel like it was a big payoff, and I hope your audience enjoys the program.
They will. What is the best way for them to get in touch with you or your company?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Eric Holder, or you can go to holdercomm.com. Find me there, and that's HOLDERCOMM.com.
Fantastic, Eric. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Laurent. We'll be in touch.
And that's it for today's episode of AI Interconnect. If you enjoyed it, share it with someone who's building the future, or better yet, someone who should be. And until next time, stay curious, stay creative, and keep building.